So today is December 6th, 2020, and we will continue today with the Teisho, connecting with the life of the Buddha in preparation or as part of our Jataka Sesshin, which we're doing in jointly with Vermont Zen Center, Toronto Zen Center, and Casa Zen San Jose, Costa Rica, and of course with Endless Path Zendo. So this Teisho is for the Endless Path Zendo group of that Rohatsu. And we're working towards the Enlightenment ceremony, which will be on Tuesday morning. So what we'll do today is I'm going to share with you a simplified version of the dramatic reading that I'll be doing in the Tuesday morning ceremony for all session participants. This version that I'll share with you is based on a retelling of the Buddha's enlightenment that I wrote way back in the early 70s. Roshi Kapleau loved it. And ever since that time, that dramatic piece, which we'll be doing in the ceremony on Tuesday morning, has been used as the reading for the Enlightenment ceremonies at all Kapleau lineage or Kapleau related centers around the world. So today, I'll just read the story in a more direct version and then comment on it as a follow up to the Teisho yesterday on leaving home, the Buddha's leaving home. Tomorrow, we'll take up a koan of the Buddha's teaching to see what happens after his enlightenment. So, the final challenge today is really touching the earth. And when the prince of the Shakya clan, Siddhartha Gautama, was 29, as you remember from the story of his leaving home, he saw an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a dedicated truth seeker. And he took it all in: aging, sickness, death, and along with it, the important possibility of a path that lay beyond that, or right in it. And he became determined to no longer prevaricate, but actively seek wisdom. So he removed his jewels, and leaving the protective walls of his palace, he shaved his beard, cut off his long hair, crossed the river boundary of his father's kingdom, leaving his inherited wealth and all his identification forever behind, and entered the nameless forests and mountains and never looked back. He sought out the two most widely respected religious teachers of his time, and mastering their methods, gained a degree of stability and calm. But it did not resolve for him the looming presence of impermanence and death. So he moved on. Hold on one second here. Hang on one second, excuse me. All right. It did not resolve for him the looming presence of impermanence and death. And so he moved on. Entering the charnel grounds and graveyards, he faced head on into the terror itself, taking up the path of willful asceticism, attempting by it to find liberation in its very pain and anguish. Limiting his eating, he survived on first 1,000, then 100, then 10, then just a single sesame seed a day. His flesh and muscles withered, his eyes sank into their sockets, his hair rotted, his bony sockets, joints, skull, and bones all stood out. After 6 years of such determined effort, he hovered at the brink of death, the goal of actual freedom seemingly beyond his grasp. And the bitterness of that moment after such effort can hardly be imagined. Just then, at the dead end limit of the ascetic path, he recalled a festival day from deep in his childhood. He'd been very young then and was seated alone under a rose apple tree, watching his father, the nobles and peasants alike, ceremonially plowing the earth together. It was a plowing festival. And while he was seated there under the rose apple tree, observing this scene as a child, self centeredness had fallen completely away, and he entered a samadhi condition. Now, at the brink of death itself, this memory returned, filling him with energy and purpose. If he touched the way as a child, when he'd been well fed and well clothed, then enlightenment didn't depend on punishing the body. He saw that clearly. And then, as if in response, mysteriously, Sujata was her name, a maiden from a neighboring village, came and stood before him, offering a bowl of milk rice. This food saved his life. He was that near death from starvation. When he accepted her offering, his five ascetic disciples, convinced that he'd abandoned the quest for truth, left him. Then he ate alone, and when he finished, he felt strong enough to stand, and he made his way to the Naranjana River, which was nearby, and he bathed there, washing away 6 years of accumulated filth. Climbing back up onto the shore, he announced, this is all the legendary material. If this is the day of my supreme enlightenment, may this bowl float upstream. And he tossed his empty bowl onto the river. Instead of going downstream, the empty bowl forged upstream against the current. Arriving at the whirlpool of Kala Nagaraja, an ancient serpent Naga king, it whirled down into his undersea or underwater realm and came to rest along or against a whole row of identical bowls. The Naga king announced, yesterday a Buddha arose, today there shall be another. Then the ex-prince Siddhartha Gautama walked to the Bodhi tree. And on his way there, he met a poor grass cutter who gave him 8 bundles of grass. This became his sitting cushion and mat. Then he spread the grass at the base of the Bodhi tree, and the future Buddha sat in the lotus posture and announced, though only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and my blood and flesh dry up and wither away, I will not leave this very spot until I have attained full enlightenment. And he pressed forward in deepening zazen. Fearsome and foul, as well as seductive and pleasant visions arose before him. The forces of life's clinging to states of joy, comfort, and ease came swaying to him in the form of 3 women, the 3 beautiful daughters of Mara. Dancing before him, they offered endless pleasure, comfort, rest. He was not distracted. Mara then sent an army, all of life's terrors, fears of death and suffering, of hell's horrors, pain, ugliness, the unknown, mobbed him. They surrounded him, horse-headed, 10-eyed, tiger-faced, many-armed, with faces in their chests, with yellow teeth and blood-dripping mouths, with spider hands, hissing with adder's tongues. On they came, heaving stones, knives, spears, flaming discs, mud, and filth, shrieking madly. They whirled upon him like a flock of hunger-maddened crows. But still he remained focused in zazen and was not moved. Then Mara himself appeared, assuming the habit voice of Gautama's innerness. He questioned, are you sure the one? You are the one? Sure you are the one? Sure you have this Buddha nature? Sure you are worthy of coming to supreme enlightenment today? Right now? Think of it. Supreme enlightenment. Supreme enlightenment. The future Buddha simply touched the earth with his right hand and asked the earth to witness for him. And the earth replied with 100, 1,000, 100,000 voices. Voices of furrows and graves, voices of youth and age, voices of man, woman, and child, the unheeded cries of beasts, the quick, unknown, silvery language of fish, the sweet twinings of plants, and the warm gray crumblings of stone. All were one voice thundering, "He is worthy." Mara's daughters, prostrated, asked forgiveness and disappeared. His great army turned tail and ran, and Mara himself vanished. Alone beneath the Bodhi tree, the future Buddha pressed on with deepening zazen until with the dawn, his mind rose clear and radiant and obvious as daybreak. And when he glanced at the morning star, he found enlightenment itself crying out, "Wonder of wonders, intrinsically all living beings are Buddhas, fully endowed with wisdom and virtue. Only their own self-centered delusions prevent them from attesting to this reality." He was 35 years of age and had broken through to what others only half dreamed. The path had been reopened. The Dharma was once again accessible to the efforts of humans and devas. So that is essentially a simplified version of my retelling based on legendary sources, traditional legendary sources of the Buddha's enlightenment. Let's take a look at this simply from the perspective of practice. And as yesterday's Teisho, basically, this is a revision of, you can find an earlier version of this in the book I wrote before Buddha was Buddha. But I don't know about you, but I'm hardly ever satisfied with my earlier work. And so I tend to pick it up again, look at it, and rewrite it. So this is a rewritten version of something you can find in print. Uh, Enlightenment is both the goal as well as the daily beating heart of Zen. Gaining calm and experiencing peaceful sitting is certainly good. But if calm were all Siddhartha had been looking for, he would never have needed to leave home. "Get your calm on here." The billboards were up all over the place. It wasn't enough. Having personally experienced the terrors of impermanence, seen with his own eyes the insubstantiality of every person and everything, a fire was lit in his mind, in his heart, and in his gut. After that, he had no choice. He simply had to keep going. This is not just a Zen Buddhist, but a universal impulse, this desire to go beyond our habitual limits. James Stephens in Irish Fairy Tales writes, "If you keep driving a pig or a story, they will get at last to where you wish them to go. And the man who keeps putting one foot in front of the other will leave his home behind and will come at last to the sea and the end of the world." The end of the world doesn't necessarily mean standing at the edge of a cliff looking down at the sea. It could be right where you are, right now. The Buddha left home and kept going until he came to the end of the arising of what we habitually think of as this old, suffering world. It's a teaching we can all take to heart, wherever we are, whatever we may have realized or not realized. We can keep going. The essence, as has been said of genius, remains 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. We do the work, then we keep doing the work. Kensho, intimately touching the ground of mind, is not the end of the road, but rather its beginning. It's like walking through a door, opening our eyes and saying, "Oh, right, here's the ground." We can then continue our journey for ourselves, knowing that solid ground lies beneath our feet. Though that makes it all seem a bit too settled. Instead, we find no ground beneath our feet. and no sky above our heads either. While that might be unsettling rather than reassuring, once we get the point, we may, like the Buddha himself, exclaim in relief, "Hooray! Wonder of wonders!" Or maybe we'd be like those two old Zen worthies in case 37 of the Shoyoroku, Book of Serenity. Isan's karmic consciousness is the case. Number 37, Shoyoroku. Isan asks Kyozan, suppose a man asks you, how about one who says all sentient beings are in a disorderly karmic consciousness and have no base to rely upon? How would you treat him? Kyozan said, if a man appears, I call to him. When he turns his head, instantly I say, what is that? I wait while he hesitates, and then I say to him, there is not only disorderly karmic consciousness, but there is no base to rely upon. Isan said, oh, good. That's it. Oh, good. Wonder of wonders. Same point. In a number of past life jatakas, the bodhisattva, as a hermit or sage, sees into the reality of selflessness, the identity of form and emptiness, and awakes to a degree to original, non-dual, true nature. Well, these were milestone moments. They were not yet the realization of Buddhahood. So the bodhisattva, still feeling incomplete, went on. Buddhist tradition says that wherever the bodhisattva destined to become the Buddha of our world cycle was born, no matter what form each of those past lives took, whatever challenging issue he faced in that life, he always chose to go further, over the next hill, beyond the next river, through the next dark forest. Onward, further was his nature, as it is ours. This is why the Tao is called the way or the path. Practice realization is not static. It's not like, oh, we get it and then that's it. No, it's a road that continues endlessly. A Zen saying says even Shakyamuni is only halfway there, which is itself a stunning pointer to just how endless endlessness might be. So wherever we are, we can certainly go further. Zen reveres the story of the historical Buddha's enlightenment because it so dramatically reveals our own potential, even as it reveals the work, that is the persistence, determinations, perseverance, and dedication that underlies all milestone experiences. The Buddha even has his Christ on the cross moment when he discovers that willful asceticism has not clarified a thing, but only left him bereft in a dark and useless place. And though the ex-prince sat and sat, in the end, simply sitting in Zazen wasn't enough. There had to be a trigger to realization. It didn't come just from looking within. It could have been a word, a sound, or anything, because his mind was ripe, empty of all fixed thoughts, assumptions, or conditioned limits. So when he glanced up after his long night of focused practice, and his eye caught the morning star, it was, aha! Suddenly gone, gone, entirely gone. A morning star sat on 8 bundles of grass. That was all. Star. Just star. But before that decisive moment, the Buddha-to-be wasn't just squatting like a frog beneath the Bodhi tree. He was poised, fully absorbed, alert as a cat crouched in front of a mouse hole. When Mara challenged him, he didn't get caught up, but he didn't ignore it either. When situations arise in our lives, we can't go off and sit until they're gone. We'll need to respond, to act. It need not be a big deal. In fact, it would be wise not to make it, whatever it is, a big deal. The Buddha simply touched the ground beneath him and asked the earth to witness for him. He didn't try to muster up a list of excellent reasons with which to out-argue Mara and so prove his worthiness. He simply did what was exactly right and also was just enough. There's a truth, too, in his final obstacle, which turned out to be self-doubt. In a sense, self-doubt is what all our obstacles come down to. Yasutani Roshi said that if it wasn't for some form of not giving ourselves fully to the inquiry, holding back, self-absorbed, self-protective, doubting in a not useful way, we'd all have been fully enlightened ages ago. Self-doubt is so pervasive that even when people are passed on an initial koan, they can fall into it. What? Can it be? Really? That's it? They may think, as long-standing habits of mind return. Yet, such doubt need not be an obstacle. It can simply be another Dharma gate that we vow to wake to. I know a Zen teacher who long ago, after being passed on his initial koan, put himself back on Mu for another 3 years before finally accepting what he already had. Many Zen teachers, when first sanctioned, go through several years of feeling like frauds, even while they are teaching and guiding others quite well. We're all in the same boat, all members of the same one nose, two eye holes society. Well, it's actually two holes in the nose, isn't it? Two nose and two eye hole society. We're all in the same boat, is the point, the Buddha included. Legend says that even after his great enlightenment, he doubted that what he'd realized could even be taught. It wasn't until the gods stepped in again, as they had when motivating him to leave home, reminding him once more of his own ancient vows, that he got up and put on the teacher's mantle, or what's known as the holeless iron kang, and began to teach. An iron kang, a wooden kang, was used to put prisoners in ancient China. Like a yoke goes over your neck, locks around your hands, the kind of thing that maybe they used to punish people in Salem, Massachusetts colony as well, something like that. Only this one that Zen teachers wear is said to be made of iron and doesn't even have a hole to put your head in. In other words, it's totally impossible and weighs a ton. So there's a lovely touch of myth in this story too. When Kala Nagaraja, the Naga king, raises his head and linear time itself falls away. For an instant, we are in the inconceivability of timelessness. And that bowl forging upstream against the current reminds us that we too must go against the flow of thoughts, concepts, and ideas that form a veil between us and this breathes, this breath, this pain in the knee, if we mean to awake. The little clink, let's say, of the bowl coming to rest against the other bowls in that long line of such bowls dramatizes the truth that others have already traversed this ancient road. The legend of the Buddha's enlightenment is part of the classical canon, and it is also an encouragement to us in our own practice now. He wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. There will be endless Buddhas in the future as well. Buddhist tradition says that we all have the nature of Buddha, have exactly the same vast, empty nature of endlessly creative potential as Shakyamuni and all previous and all future Buddhas. This is not something that's owned by Buddhas. It's not like that at all. From the first, we are each fully and equally endowed with wisdom and compassion. And because it is already who we are, if we practice, if we make the effort, then we too can, to one degree or another, realize that is awake to our own original mind. But effort must be made. We'll not simply float into realization of our own nature and begin magically living from it uh, just all on its own. As the great iconoclastic Japanese Zen master Ikkyu, whose dates are 1394 to 1481, succinctly said it, there is no natural Shakyamuni. In other words, though we already are it, we will not realize it unless we work at it. And this is the great paradox. If we are it, if the Buddha wasn't a fool and he wasn't a liar when he said each of us, each being is already Buddha, if we are it, then why must we do all this? Why must we work so hard to realize what we already are? This question kept bugging Dogen, the great teacher, giving him no peace. If, as the Buddha himself proclaimed upon his great enlightenment, all beings are Buddha, why did all the sages of the past have to sweat blood to know it? That was his question. And the lack of peace that it brought him, the discomfort that it brought him, forged a great resolve, and in the end led him to great peace. Of course, enlightenment isn't a thing we can get, except in the sense of, oh, I get it. If anything, it comes from losing, not gaining. Losing all that ancient, interior, self-centered stuff that cuts us off from wind, rain, sun, moon, stars, trees, animals, people. With that wonderful failure, that liberating loss, we uncover intimacy, which is what we've been seeking for who knows how long. Enlightenment is simply a name given to our ability to attest to our own original, unblemished, without a thought, not even a cloud, not even a mist, intimacy with sun, moon, stars, wind, rain, snow, clouds, trash, bugs, cats, rivers, mountains, trees, people. We do not gain it because it has in reality never been lost. Like the ground, it has always been here. We just haven't had the steadiness to notice. And it's not that I become intimate with everything. No, 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 no. Keizan Jokin in the opening of Denkoroku, Transmission of Light, writes, Shakyamuni Buddha saw the morning star and was enlightened, and he said, I and the great earth and beings simultaneously attained the way. And then in the Teisho, Keizan wrote on this case, he says, the so-called I is not Shakyamuni Buddha, and Shakyamuni Buddha also comes from this I. What is this I? Not EYE, just I. Zen asks, okay, if we are this enlightened nature, this great I, then where is it? And why don't I know it? In our Zazen, we bore into such questions like a thirsty person drilling for water. A sonar survey, the life of the Buddha, the Jatakas, and Zen teaching itself show us that water is here. So we have a map We're not running on blind belief. And our map shows us that all the water we will ever need is already beneath our feet. And so we keep at it. We sit and we sit. We go to Sesshin, we come to Doksan, listen to Teisho, chant sutras, examine precepts in our daily lives. We experience the breath, we count the breath, we just sit, or we return to koan point after koan point. In short, we actualize our original vow, the vow of mind itself and of all maturing beings or bodhisattvas or wisdom beings to continue on and realize the ancient way for the benefit of all. Wisdom, which is compassion, compassion, which is no other than wisdom, comes down to a continuous practice of lessening habitual identifications with self-centeredness, not by pushing the self away, not by suppressing or ignoring it, which only reifies a sense of self, but by seeing into and through it, by understanding the nature of this very self. To paraphrase the central point of Dogen's Zen, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awake to primal intimacy with all things. This intimate practice continues endlessly. So practice is not cast aside with realization. Practice is the realization of realization. Practice continues to unfold, but is no longer forced. It is simply who we are. The Buddha, the ex-prince, touched the earth after lifetimes of such practice, as the Jatakas show. For many people, too, it may not be until years into their practice, after various initial and important milestones, that the gateless gate swings open wide and they truly, personally know. Yet even this is just another beginning. The Buddha's realization points the way. It was total and complete, every level of character and mind fully realized, fully functioning. And it was so because of the countless lifetimes of work the Jataka show preceding it. In substance, while every kensho, the small kind we're likely to realize, and the Buddha's own great enlightenment are exactly the same in content, are exactly the same. However, in content, they are vastly different. Buddhist mythos says that in this world age, no one experienced more deeply than Shakyamuni because no one had worked so hard or so long to prepare the ground. He touched not just the ground, but the bottomless bottom and the soaring heights. Comparing our realization of practice, our practice of realization to his, would be like comparing the finger painting of a kindergartner to a work by Rembrandt or Picasso. The substance is exactly the same. Both are paintings, but their degree of conscious realization is vastly different. Yet we must all begin somewhere, and for the kindergartner, that finger painting could be just as meaningful as Rembrandt's work was for him. The Buddha's story, his home leaving and forest path exertions, his abandonment by his ascetic disciples, and his solitary confrontation with Mara, the primordial force of his and our habitual ignorance, completes his many lifetime Jataka path. Touching the earth, he gets up and walks on, transcending the final temptation to sit forever at ease in his own long sought, hard won pavilion of complete enjoyment, freedom, wisdom, and peace. Instead, He devotes his next 50 years of life to walking the dusty roads of India, teaching those who, while in reality as complete and whole as he, just didn't know it. He goes back into the seeming chaos of the 10,000 things, at total peace with it all, a half smile on his lips. Just prior to the moment of enlightenment, after the Buddha to be's 6 years of exhaustive effort and endless kalpas of jataka practice exertions, going the limit, trying and trying with all he had, drawing on the power of his own past efforts, failures, and triumphs, Mara, the Buddhist tempter or distractor, the inner voice of ego, in our version, takes off his masks and appears quite nakedly. Mara is worried and makes a last ditch effort to turn the once sheltered, now deeply determined ex prince from his goal. To do this, he pulls his ace in the hole. What is it? Of course, it's self doubt. What? I have this true nature? It is me and I can realize it? Really? This doubt convinces us to cling to belief in the solidity of a forever separate, winning, losing interior self, a permanent self that can be saved, thereby gluing us to what is only provisionally real. Mara confronts the Buddha to be and asks, how could you, a sheltered ex-prince, be worthy of the supreme goal of complete enlightenment? Get real. Better men and women too, better than you, have tried and failed. You're young and a beginner to boot. Give yourself time. Eventually you might do it. You've got the basic stuff, but now, no way. Back off. Take it slow. It's a reasonable request and reasonable advice. Reasonable as all get out. Devilishly reasonable. Take it easy. Be careful. Go slow. Prepare. Reduce attachments over time. Reduce ego concerns. Be humble. Don't be hasty. The sixth patriarch, Wei Nung, said to have been an illiterate woodcutter, came to the practice place of the fifth patriarch in China, Hung Jian, who asked him, where have you come from? What do you seek? The illiterate woodcutter answered, I am a Buddhist pupil from among the common people of Lingnan. I have come a great distance to pay my respects to you and to seek to become a Buddha. The fifth patriarch responded almost like some Mara. You are a southerner and a boor. Such a one has no Buddha nature. Hui Nung answered, I may be a southerner and a boor, but what has that to do with Buddha nature? From the standpoint of Buddha nature, there is neither north nor south, monk nor boor. What difference can this make when it comes to becoming Buddha? The fifth patriarch found he'd caught a live one, after all. Maras are said to exist throughout the endless worlds. The good news is that all Maras may actually be advanced bodhisattvas. The Vimalakirti Sutra takes this position. Their challenges, then, are skillful means or upaya meant to help us mature by forcing us to clarify our limited and partial understanding. Wu Men, in his verse to case number 5 of the Wu Men Quan, that's Mumen Kan in Japanese, gateless barrier, Sheng Yen up a tree writes, Sheng Yen is truly outrageous. He spreads poison limitlessly. He stops up the monks' mouths and watches them squirm with the black, piercing eyes of a devil. That last line, with the black, piercing eyes of a devil, gives us a portrait of the Zen teacher as Mara. And indeed, sometimes it can seem like that. The fifth patriarch assumed that role in his challenge to Wei Nong. However, Wei Nong, while illiterate, was not confused. He knew where he stood, as did the Buddha about to be beneath the Bodhi tree. At this crucial juncture, with worlds hanging in the balance, the ex-prince Siddhartha doesn't waste time arguing with the habit voice of his own separateness, his own predilection towards self-centeredness or egotism. He doesn't even try to put together a reasonable counter-argument. To enter the fray is to have already lost. Ready? Not ready. A self that gains, a self that loses, a self that has it, a self that doesn't have it. He doesn't get sucked into Mata's metaphor at all. Instead, seeing the joke, he probably smiled. Maybe he even shook his head in pity for poor old Mara. Then he reached down and touched the earth and let the earth, the humble, always present, endlessly trod upon earth, witness for him. And the earth witnessed to all activities, all lives, including the Buddha's own endless Jataka ones, replied with its thousands of living voices speaking as one. Interbeing, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's felicitous term, awakes, and Mara, overwhelmed, gives up. Jataka tales are the record of the Buddha's own practice history. It is a particularly long history said to go back eons, world ages, big bangs. According to Buddhist tradition, we too have our own Jataka history. Things happened that made us who we are. We stumbled, we scratched our knees, got up, let the wound scab over, and tried again. We met with joys and sorrows. Perhaps our history might also extend back through ages. Where, after all, does the path of causation that unfolds as each plant, bug, animal, bird, us begin? Bodhidharma's one mind precepts states, self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. Our nature, the nature that right now hears these words, that feels sensations, that thinks thoughts, the nature that gets hungry and eats, gets tired and sleeps, is wondrous. A cut bleeds and then it heals. An impossible burger becomes a thought, a symphony, a heartbeat, a length of muscle. Inconceivably wondrous self-nature is who we already are. Like the ground beneath us, it has always been here. At his moment of final challenge, the Buddha touched the earth, the humble ground beneath him. He didn't reach for the sky or beg for help from above. He didn't fall for Mata's metaphor and try to win the debate or out-argue the distractor. He touched the always present, selfless, sat on, trod on ground and asked the earth to testify to what she'd seen. Her humbly solid response confirms him, overwhelming all doubt, even self-doubt. What builds solid ground beneath us is the work we do now. Roshi Kapleau used to say, if you don't let the Dharma down, the Dharma will never let you down. No effort sincerely made is ever wasted. What makes it all such a lovely story is that this is not just ancient history. It's our story too. This moment is part of the ongoing Jataka series of the unfully realized Buddhas we each are. Essential nature, mind itself, the ground beneath us, is always here. past lives, past thoughts, decisions, and events led to this present one, in which we now sit, walk, stand, speak, eat, work, worry, create, pick our noses. Come day's end, we say good night and lie down on the ground of our nature, the ground we practice from, have always been standing on, whether we know it or not. And it too is always there, ready to testify for us if we ask it. The Denko transmission of light, as I've mentioned, opens with the experience of Shakyamuni Buddha. Keizan presents the Buddha's whole quest and its fulfillment in one clear sentence, the whole deal. Shakyamuni Buddha saw the morning star and was enlightened, and he said, I and the great earth and beings simultaneously attain the way. I. What is that? And the great earth and beings simultaneously attain the way. Keizan doesn't even mention touching the earth. He goes right to the star. Our fundamental vow as human beings is to know ourselves. This is why we practice. Not to become special thises or that's, but to know who or what we already actually are. Zen Master Dogen presented the realization of practice as this. When the self advances to confirm the 10,000 things, it is called delusion. When the 10,000 things advance and confirm the self, it is called enlightenment. The 10,000 things are bugs, birds, clouds, mountains, rivers, people, animals, traffic sounds, cell phones, raindrops, pebbles, clumps of earth, bright morning stars. Ordinary things confirm us, tell us, indeed, make us who we are every day. In reality, there is no barrier between us and a single thing. That enlightenment is intimacy is not cleverness. It is simply how things are. And because this is so, we all have the potential to awake to it. Touching the earth is always possible because real ground is never far away. And neither is a star. A monk once asked the great Zhao Chu, does even a dog have Buddha nature? Zhao Chu, unfazed by have or have not, said, Mu. 1,500 years before that, 2,500 years before us, Mara approached the Buddha and asked, do even you have this Buddha nature? Do even you have this Buddha nature? The ex-prince Siddhartha Gautama, unfazed by has or has not, touched the earth. A simple gesture that changes the possibilities of our own lives, whether we know it or not. Zen's presentational non-discursive language begins here. As Bodhidharma said to Wei Ke, I have put it to rest for you. How do we make this our own? We count 1, 2, 3. We experience this breath. We become this koan, this moment of life, this Sesshin. We give ourselves fully to it. Steady on is itself our personal actualization of the great way. We'll stop here and recite our vows, uh, our vows for all beings. So I will stop